The smell of fried chicken and coffee filled the small diner every morning, before the sun had even risen. It was the kind of place that never seemed to sleep, always busy, always noisy, always full of people trying to fill their stomachs before heading back to their long, hard lives. Behind the counter, moving quickly from one table to another, was a young woman named Clara. She wore the same pale blue uniform every day, a little faded from too many washes, and a white apron tied tight around her waist. Clara had worked at the diner for almost 5 years now. It wasn't the kind of job she had dreamed of when she was younger, but it helped keep the bills paid and food on the table for her mother and younger brother. Every morning she woke before dawn, packed a small lunch, and took the bus into town. By the time she arrived, the cook was already shouting orders and the smell of bacon filled the air. Most of the customers were regulars, truck drivers, tired factory workers, and a few families passing through on their way somewhere better. Clara always smiled and spoke politely, even when people were rude or impatient. She had learned a long time ago that kindness was often the best way to survive. There was an old piano in the corner of the diner. It had been there since before Clara started working. Nobody ever played it. The wood was scratched, the keys were yellow, and one of the pedals was missing. Some of the kids who came in would press a few notes and laugh at how out of tune it sounded, but mostly it sat there collecting dust. To most people, it was just part of the decoration, a reminder of the old days when someone might have played a cheerful tune for the guests. But for Clara, that piano was something else entirely. Every time she walked past it, she felt something deep inside her stir, a mix of longing and sadness. She used to play, back when her father was alive. He had been the church pianist in their small neighborhood. On Sunday evenings after dinner, he would sit her down next to him and teach her how to play by ear. She remembered his strong hands moving across the keys, his warm voice humming the melody. "Music ain't just notes, baby," he used to say. "It's feelings turned into sound. When you play, you tell your story." But those lessons had ended too soon. Her father passed away suddenly one summer, and the family had to move into a smaller place. The piano was sold to pay off some debts, and Clara never touched another one again. She tried to forget how much she missed it, but sometimes, late at night, she'd catch herself humming the old church songs he used to play. Now, standing behind the counter of the diner, she sometimes glanced toward that piano in the corner and felt her heart ache just a little. Her boss, Mr. Harlan, was a gruff, middle-aged man with a thick mustache and a habit of chewing gum too loudly. He ran the diner like it was a military camp. No excuses, no slow work, no backtalk. Clara had learned to keep her head down and do what she was told. She needed this job. Her brother was still in school and her mother's health wasn't good. There wasn't room for mistakes. On that particular Friday morning, the diner was unusually busy. A group of out-of-town men had come in, construction workers from a nearby project. They were loud, laughing, and already half-drunk even though it wasn't yet noon. They took up 2 of the biggest tables and shouted for refills every few minutes. Clara tried to keep up, balancing plates on her arms, dodging chairs, and pretending not to hear the rude comments that sometimes came her way. As the lunch rush began to die down, the air inside the diner grew thick and heavy. The old ceiling fan spun lazily, pushing around the smell of coffee and grease. The men at the back table had finished eating, but they didn't seem ready to leave. One of them leaned back in his chair, his boots crossed on the table leg. "This place is dead quiet," he said loudly. "Ain't y'all got no music in here?" A few of his friends laughed. Another one pointed toward the piano in the corner. "There's your music," he said. "Looks like it's been sitting there since the war." Everyone chuckled, even Mr. Harlan, who was wiping down the counter. "Ain't nobody plays that thing," he said. "Been broken for years." The first man turned to Clara. "What about you, sweetheart? You look like you got soft hands. You play?" Clara froze, holding a coffee pot halfway over his cup. "No, sir," she said quickly. "Not anymore, not anymore?" The man repeated, grinning. "That sounds like a story." Mr. Harlan frowned, noticing the hesitation in her voice. "Wait, you used to play?" Clara's heart started to pound. She didn't want to talk about it. "A little. When I was younger. It's been a long time." The man at the table laughed. "Well, how about you give us a show then?" "It's too quiet in here." Clara shook her head, forcing a smile. "I can't, sir. It's been years. I don't even remember how." The man turned to Mr. Harlan. "Come on, boss man, let her play. Let's see what she's got." Mr. Harlan chuckled. "She's got work to do. But the men kept pushing, clapping their hands and chanting playfully, "Let her play. Let her play." Soon, even some of the other customers started joining in, curious to see what would happen. Clara felt her cheeks grow hot. She wanted to disappear. Mr. Harlan looked at her with a smirk. "Well, Clara," he said, "you got a crowd waiting. Go on, make 'em happy. That old thing could use some life anyway." "Please, Mr. Harlan," Clara whispered. "I really can't." His smile faded. "You can, or you can clock out early. Up to you." The laughter around the diner faded into a low murmur. Clara stood frozen, staring at the floor. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting, judging, amused. She took a slow breath, then nodded. "Yes, sir." She set the coffee pot down and walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her hands were shaking and her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. The piano looked even older up close. Dust covered the surface and one of the keys was chipped. She ran her fingers lightly across the keyboard. The touch brought back memories she had buried deep inside. Her father's face, his laughter, the sound of the church choir behind her. The room was quiet now. Even the men who had been laughing were watching in silence. Clara swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. She sat down on the creaky stool and placed her fingers gently on the keys. She pressed one note. It was flat and hollow. The men snickered. Someone muttered, "Told you it don't work." Clara took another deep breath. Her palms were sweating. She didn't want to do this. But somewhere inside her, a small voice whispered, "Play." Her fingers moved slowly, hesitantly, searching for something familiar. A melody from long ago came back to her, a simple gospel tune her father used to play on Sunday mornings. She tried one note, then another. The sound was shaky at first, but she kept going. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The noise of the diner faded away. It was just her, the piano, and the memory of her father's hands guiding hers. But before she could lose herself completely in the music, Mr. Harlan interrupted. All right, he said loudly. "We ain't got all day for warm-ups. Play something real or get back to work." The laughter returned. Clara's fingers froze. The fragile moment shattered. She stood up quickly, mumbling, "I'm sorry," and walked back to the counter. The men groaned, disappointed that the show was over. Mr. Harlan gave her a sharp look but said nothing. For the rest of the shift, Clara worked in silence. The noise of the diner returned to normal, but inside she felt a storm brewing. She hadn't expected the simple touch of those piano keys to shake her so deeply. Something inside her had woken up. A part of herself she had thought was gone forever. When her shift finally ended, she untied her apron, hung it on the hook, and stepped outside. The evening air was cool and quiet. The sky had turned a deep orange as the sun set behind the hills. Clara walked slowly down the sidewalk, her hands still tingling from the touch of those old piano keys. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. Something had changed inside her that day. Something that couldn't be easily silenced again. Clara didn't sleep much that night. She lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the streetlight outside her window. The sound of the piano from earlier that day kept playing in her mind over and over. Every note she had touched seemed to echo in her chest. She thought she had buried that part of her life long ago. The music, the dreams, the feeling of her father's hands guiding hers on the keys. But now, after just a few seconds of playing, everything had come rushing back. Her mother noticed the next morning. "You're quiet today, baby," she said softly, stirring oatmeal on the stove. "Something wrong at work?" Clara shook her head. "No, Ma. Just tired, that's all." But her mother could always tell when something was on her mind. She gave her daughter a long look but didn't press. After breakfast, Clara tied her hair back and put on her uniform. As she walked to the bus stop, the air was cool and still. The town was slowly waking up. Store owners unlocking their doors, kids running to school, the sound of birds singing above the rooftops. She walked past the little church on the corner, and through the open window she heard a faint sound of someone playing the piano inside. It stopped her in her tracks. She stood there for a moment, listening. The melody was rough, like a beginner's, but it was enough to make her eyes sting. She turned quickly and kept walking, afraid of what might happen if she lingered too long. When she got to the diner, the smell of coffee and biscuits hit her right away. The morning rush had already started. She tied her apron and got to work, greeting customers, pouring coffee, smiling when she had to. But something felt different. The piano in the corner seemed louder in her head now, even though it was silent. The men from yesterday weren't there, thank goodness, just the regular crowd. Still, every time she passed the piano, she caught a few curious glances. Word must have spread. Around mid-morning, Mr. Harlan came out of his office, wiping his hands on a towel. "Clara," he said, motioning for her to come over. "Yes, sir?" He leaned against the counter. "You know, folks been talking about you." Her stomach tightened. "About me?" "About that little show yesterday." He grinned. "Didn't think you had it in you." "I didn't really play," she said quickly. "Just a few notes. Still got their attention, though. Ain't easy to do that." She didn't know how to respond. He continued. "Might be good for business, you know. A little entertainment once in a while. Gets people talking." Her heart sank. "You mean, you want me to play again?" "Maybe. Not right now, but next time we got a crowd in here, you might as well earn a few extra tips. You could use the money, right?" Clara bit her lip. She did need the money. Every dollar counted. But the thought of sitting at that piano again in front of strangers made her stomach twist. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. Mr. Harlan gave her a satisfied nod. "Good girl. Don't take too long." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Orders came and went. Plates clattered, people complained or laughed, and the sound of the bell above the door rang again and again. But Clara barely heard any of it. Her mind kept drifting back to that piano and her father's voice in her memory. After work, she stayed behind to help clean up. Most of the lights were off now, and the diner felt strange, quiet and still, like it was holding its breath. The piano sat there in the corner, half in shadow. She looked around. No one else was there. Slowly, she walked over to it. The wood felt cool under her fingertips. She lifted the cover, and the faint smell of dust and old varnish rose up. She pressed one key softly, then another. The notes were off, but she didn't care. She closed her eyes and began to play the same tune she had started the day before. This time she didn't stop. The sound was shaky at first, then smoother, fuller. Her fingers found their way like they remembered what to do all along. The music filled the empty diner, bouncing off the walls and ceiling. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Every note carried a piece of her heart, her memories, her loss, her quiet strength. She didn't realize how much time had passed until a voice spoke behind her. "I didn't know you could play like that." Clara jumped and turned. It was Mr. Harlan. He stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't think anyone was here." He shook his head slowly. "You got some talent there, Clara, real talent." She didn't say anything. She just stared at the piano keys. He stepped closer. "You ever think about playing in church or something?" "I used to," she said softly. "A long time ago." He nodded thoughtfully. "Well, maybe you should start again. People like to see something special. Makes them feel good. And if it helps this place, all the better." She gave a small, uncertain smile. "Maybe." He started to leave, then turned back. "You keep practicing. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the reason this old diner gets busy again." After he left, Clara sat there a few minutes longer, staring at the keys. A part of her wanted to be angry. Angry that he only saw her music as something useful for business. But another part of her felt something else. Hope, maybe, or maybe just curiosity about what could happen if she really tried. When she finally got home, her brother was at the table doing homework. Her mother was sewing by the window. The small radio on the counter played a soft tune. "How was work?" her mother asked. Clara hesitated, then said, "It was fine." Her mother smiled knowingly. "You're thinking about something." Clara looked down, then said quietly, "There's a piano at the diner. I played a little yesterday." Her mother stopped sewing. "You did?" Clara nodded. "They asked me to. I didn't want to, but I don't know. When I started playing, it felt like I was home again." Her mother's eyes softened. "Your daddy would be so proud to hear that." Clara smiled faintly. "I'm not sure I'll ever be as good as him. He never wanted you to be him," her mother said. "He wanted you to be you." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft music from the radio. That night, Clara dreamed of her father. In the dream, they were sitting at the old church piano again. The light from the window fell across the keys, and he was smiling at her, nodding as she played. When she woke up, tears were on her cheeks, but her heart felt lighter. The next few days, she couldn't stay away from the piano. Every evening after her shift, She'd wait until the diner emptied out and the lights dimmed. Then she'd sit down and play quietly, just for herself. Sometimes she'd play the hymns she learned as a child. Other times she made up her own tunes, soft wandering melodies that seemed to tell stories without words. One night she didn't realize that someone had stayed behind. An older woman, one of the regulars who always sat near the window, had forgotten her purse and come back for it. She stopped at the doorway listening. When Clara finished, the woman clapped softly. "That was beautiful, dear," she said. "You've got a gift." Clara blushed. "Thank you, ma'am. I didn't know anyone was still here." The woman smiled. "Don't hide it. The world needs more beauty." Those words stayed with her long after the woman left. Little by little, Clara began to feel different. The weariness she used to carry every day started to fade. The long shifts didn't seem so hard anymore. Even the rude customers didn't bother her like before. The piano had awakened something in her, a quiet strength, a reminder that she was more than just a waitress serving food. But she also knew that sooner or later, she'd have to face that moment again, the moment when everyone would be watching, waiting for her to play. And next time she might not have the choice to walk away. Days turned into weeks, and life at the diner went on much the same. The same bell above the door jingled each morning. The same smell of frying oil and coffee filled the air, and the same people came and went with the same stories. But for Clara, everything felt a little different now. She still worked hard, taking orders, carrying trays, cleaning tables. But each time her eyes drifted toward that piano in the corner, she felt a quiet pull. It wasn't just an old piece of furniture anymore. It was like a friend waiting for her, patient and silent, reminding her of who she really was beneath the apron and tired smile. At first, she only played after closing time, when everyone had gone home. She'd stay for 10, maybe 15 minutes, just long enough to let her fingers move and her heart breathe. Sometimes she'd hum softly to herself while she played. The sound filled the empty diner like a soft light. One evening, as she was finishing a song, she heard clapping from behind her. She turned quickly. This time it wasn't Mr. Harlan or the old lady who had caught her before. It was one of the young cooks, a shy boy who usually kept to himself. "Sorry," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't mean to scare you, I just never heard anything like that before." Clara smiled nervously. "It's just something I used to do." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. That was special. You should play when people are here. They'd love it." She didn't know what to say. Maybe someday. But inside, the words stayed with her. Maybe someday. A few nights later, as she was getting ready to leave, Mr. Harlan stopped her near the counter. "You got plans this weekend?" he asked. "No, sir," she said. "Good," he replied. "There's going to be a big crowd Saturday evening. Some local folks coming in after the parade downtown. I want you to play then." Clara froze. "Play? You mean in front of everyone?" He nodded, chewing his gum slowly. "Yeah, you've been practicing, haven't you? Time to show 'em what you got. We'll make a night out of it." She wanted to say no. Her stomach turned at the thought of sitting in front of all those people, their eyes on her, waiting to see if she'd mess up. But she could see from his face that saying no wasn't really an option. I'll try," she said quietly. "That's all I ask," he said with a grin. "Don't worry, you'll be fine." The rest of the week went by faster than she expected. Every night when she came home, she told herself she'd practice a little, but her nerves got in the way. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her hands, wondering if they would remember what to do when it mattered. Her mother noticed her unease. "You've been fidgeting all week," she said one evening. "What's troubling you?" Clara sighed. "Mr. Harlan wants me to play at the diner Saturday. For everyone." Her mother smiled gently. "That's a good thing, isn't it?" "I don't know," Clara said softly. "What if I mess up? What if they laugh?" Her mother set down her sewing and looked her in the eye. "People will always talk, baby. But if you play from your heart, you got nothing to be afraid of. Your daddy used to say that all the time." Clara nodded slowly. "I just don't want to embarrass myself." Her mother reached out and took her hand. "You won't. You were born for this." When Saturday finally came, Clara woke up early. Her hands felt cold all morning. She tried to keep busy, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, folding laundry, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the diner. By the time she arrived for her shift, the place was already buzzing. The town parade had ended and people were pouring in, laughing and talking loudly. The smell of food filled the air and every seat was taken. Mr. Harlan stood near the counter, smiling proudly. "Perfect crowd," he said. "You play after the dinner rush. Don't be nervous, don't be nervous." She repeated those words over and over in her head, but they didn't help. Every time she looked at that piano in the corner, her heart raced faster. As the evening went on, the noise grew louder. The air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses and the scrape of silverware on plates. Clara worked as fast as she could, trying to focus on her job and not on what was coming. When the crowd began to settle down after their meals, Mr. Harlan called out, "All right, folks, how about some music tonight?" The chatter quieted a little. Some people turned their heads toward him curiously. He nodded toward Clara. "Our very own Clara's going to play for y'all. You might not know it, but she's got a gift." Her heart dropped. She felt her knees weaken. For a second, she wanted to run out the door, but the room was already looking at her, waiting. Mr. Harlan gave her an encouraging nod. "Go on now. Show 'em what you can do." Clara took a slow breath and walked toward the piano. The sound of her shoes on the floor seemed louder than everything else in the room. She could feel her hands shaking. She sat down on the stool, straightened her back, and stared at the keys. The room felt smaller somehow, like the air had thickened around her. A few people whispered and someone chuckled softly. She closed her eyes and took another deep breath. Her father's words came back to her. Music ain't just notes. Its feelings turned into sound. She placed her fingers gently on the keys and began to play. The first few notes were soft and uncertain, but she kept going. Slowly, the melody began to take shape. It was a song she used to play with her father, a slow, soulful tune that rose and fell like a heartbeat. The diner grew quiet. The clatter of dishes stopped. Even the laughter faded. Everyone watched her, listening. Her fingers started to move faster, more confident. She felt the music building inside her, rising up from a place she hadn't touched in years. Her fear melted away, replaced by something warm and powerful. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't tired or small or unseen. She was alive, and the music was pouring out of her like light. People leaned closer, eyes wide. Some smiled. A few even wiped their eyes. When she reached the last note, she let it linger, soft and trembling, before her hands finally fell still. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then the applause started. Slow at first, then louder, stronger, until the whole diner was clapping and cheering. Clara sat frozen, stunned by the sound. She had never imagined that kind of reaction. Her face flushed with emotion, and for a moment she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mr. Harlan stepped forward, beaming. "Didn't I tell you?" He shouted over the noise. "Ain't she something?" The crowd agreed with whistles and cheers. A few customers stood up, clapping harder. Clara smiled shyly and stood. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried. When the noise finally settled, people started coming up to her, praising her, shaking her hand, asking where she learned to play. She didn't know how to answer. "It was my daddy," she said finally. "He taught me everything I know." "Well, he taught you good," one man said with a grin. "You keep at it, girl. Don't hide that kind of gift." For the rest of the night, the diner felt different. The same walls, the same tables, the same smells, but something new was in the air. People were smiling more, talking softer, like the music had touched something deep in all of them. When her shift finally ended, Clara helped clean up in silence. Mr. Harlan came over, patting her shoulder. "You did real good tonight," he said. "Real good. You should have seen their faces. They loved you." "Thank you," she said quietly, still overwhelmed. He grinned. "Guess we'll have to make this a regular thing, huh?" She laughed softly. "Maybe." As she walked home under the night sky, she couldn't stop smiling. The stars seemed brighter than usual, and her steps felt lighter. She thought about her father again, about all those nights she'd sat beside him, listening, learning, dreaming. He was gone now, but tonight, for the first time, she felt like he was there with her, smiling, proud, and maybe even playing along somewhere she couldn't see. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "I did it, Daddy." And in the quiet night, with the faint sound of wind rustling through the trees, she could almost hear him say, "I know you did, baby." I know. After that night, Clara felt different. Something had shifted inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. The music had awakened a part of her she thought was gone. Every time she remembered the applause, the smiles, the awe on people's faces, Her chest swelled with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. She had always known the piano was part of her, but now she realized the world might need to see it too. The next morning, she woke with a quiet determination. The sun streamed through her window and she could hear the birds singing outside. Her mother was at the kitchen table pouring coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "You seem different this morning," her mother said, her eyes soft. "Good different, I hope." Clara smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess I am. Last night, it felt good." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I told you, baby. You can't keep hiding that gift." Clara nodded, sipping her coffee. She didn't know yet what it meant to stop hiding it, but she knew she wanted to try. At the diner, things were noticeably quieter that morning. The regulars had heard about her performance, and there was a kind of buzz in the air, though no one said it directly. As Clara moved between tables taking orders and pouring coffee, she could feel the curious eyes of people she had never even noticed before. They weren't just looking at her as a waitress anymore. They were looking at the girl who had played the piano. Mr. Harlan came out of his office mid-morning, clapping his hands. "Clara, folks keep asking about you. People want another show. Guess we'll have to plan something." Clara froze. "Another show?" she asked cautiously. He nodded. "Yeah, don't worry, it won't be anything fancy. Just a little something to make the place lively. But people are excited to hear you again." Her stomach flipped. The thought of playing again in front of an audience made her nervous, but it also sparked a flicker of excitement. Maybe this time she could play for herself too, not just for survival or for the approval of others. Over the next few days, Clara found herself practicing more consistently. After her shifts, she would sit at the piano while the diner was empty, letting her fingers flow across the keys. She experimented with new melodies, blending the gospel songs she had learned with tunes she made up on the spot. She noticed how the music seemed to tell stories she hadn't even known she had inside her, stories of longing, resilience, and quiet hope. One evening, as she played, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. It was a young man who delivered supplies to the diner. He had been coming by for months, always polite but quiet. "You play beautifully," he said, his voice low. "You really should do it in front of more people. Not just here." Clara paused, unsure how to respond. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. "You can," he replied. "You just need the chance. People will listen, I promise." His words lingered in her mind long after he left. Maybe he was right. Maybe she didn't have to wait for someone to force her to play. Maybe she could step forward on her own terms. A few days later, a new face appeared at the diner. A woman in her 40s, dressed neatly and carrying a small notebook, approached Clara cautiously. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm a music teacher in town. I heard you play the other night." Clara blinked. "You did?" "Yes," the woman said warmly. "Some friends were talking and I had to hear it for myself. You have a real gift. Have you ever thought about performing outside of this diner?" Clara's heart pounded. She shook her head. I don't know if I'm ready for that." The woman smiled. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But if you ever want to, I could help. There are local events, small concerts. People would love to hear you." Clara felt a mix of fear and excitement. The thought of stepping out of the diner and performing in front of strangers made her stomach twist. But she also felt a spark, a tiny voice inside her whispering, "You can do this." Over the next week, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the woman's words. She practiced more intentionally now, not just for herself but imagining the possibility of something bigger. Each note she played felt like a step toward a door she'd been afraid to open. The following Saturday, the diner held another small gathering. Mr. Harlan had decided to make a night of it, advertising the event in the town square. A modest crowd gathered, curious to see what all the talk was about. When Clara arrived, she felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. "Are you ready?" Mr. Harlan asked quietly. "I think so," she replied, taking a deep breath. The diner was packed. People were chatting, laughing, and sipping coffee. But the moment Clara sat at the piano, a hush fell over the room. The spotlight wasn't literal, but it felt as if it were. Every eye was on her. She placed her hands on the keys, just as she had done before, and let the first note flow. This time there was no hesitation. The music moved freely with confidence and feeling. She played longer, mixing the familiar songs from her childhood with new tunes she had created. She lost herself in the sound, letting it guide her. carrying her through memories, dreams, and the quiet strength she had found in herself. The audience was captivated. People leaned forward mesmerized. Some had tears in their eyes. The applause that followed was louder, longer, and more genuine than the first time. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she had never known, a mix of joy, pride, and relief. Afterward, people came up to her, shaking her hand, praising her, asking when they could hear her play again. One man even offered to help set up a small performance at the local community center. For the first time, Clara realized that her music wasn't just for herself or for the few people who had seen her play by accident. It could reach others, touch them, and perhaps even change something in their lives. Her mother noticed the difference too. "You're glowing," she said one evening. "I've never seen you like this. Proud, happy, alive." Clara smiled, thinking of the piano and the nights she had spent alone practicing. She felt stronger than ever, as if she had finally stepped into a place she was meant to be. Word spread quickly through the town. More people came to the diner to hear her play, sometimes just sitting quietly in a corner listening. Clara started to enjoy the attention, not for the sake of praise, but because she knew she was sharing a piece of herself. Each performance made her more confident, more aware of what she could do, and more determined to keep going. One evening, as she was closing up the diner, the music teacher returned. "I see you're getting brave," she said, smiling. Clara laughed softly. "I guess I am. You should think about performing outside of this place," the woman said. "I can help you find opportunities. People will come to hear you just like they come here." Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe I will. One day." That night, as she walked home under the quiet sky, she felt a new sense of purpose. The piano had opened a door, and she knew that there were paths she had never dared to walk before. It wasn't just about music, it was about finding herself, her voice, and the courage to step into the world as she truly was. The weeks that followed brought more small performances at the diner, each one a little bolder than the last. People began to recognize her when she walked down the street, smiling and greeting her warmly. The applause, once shocking and overwhelming, now felt like a gentle affirmation of who she was becoming. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, Clara sat quietly at the piano, letting the last notes linger in the air. Mr. Harlan approached, a proud smile on his face. "You've done something remarkable here," he said softly. "I never expected it, but you've brought life back into this place. People are happier, and honestly, so am I." Clara looked at him and smiled. "I didn't do it for that," she said. "I did it for me." He nodded, understanding. "Well, whatever you do, don't stop. You've got something special. Don't let it go to waste." Clara touched the keys one last time that night, feeling the smoothness beneath her fingers, the memories and dreams she had poured into the music. She knew this was just the beginning. Her journey wasn't over. In fact, it was only starting. She walked home under the stars, carrying the quiet music with her in her heart, knowing that life had opened a new chapter. One where she could finally be herself fully without fear, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt truly free. Weeks passed, and Clara's life began to feel fuller than it had in years. The diner remained busy, but it was no longer just a place to work. It had become a stage, a small sanctuary where she could let her music flow freely and touch the people around her. With each performance, her confidence grew. The fear that had once tightened her chest and made her hands shake seemed to melt away, replaced by a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. One morning, she woke early, her body humming with anticipation. Today was different. Today she had been invited to perform at a local community event, a small gathering in the town square meant to raise funds for a new library. She had never imagined that she would play anywhere besides the diner. The thought of stepping outside into a larger crowd made her stomach flutter. Her mother noticed immediately as she poured her coffee. "You're restless," she said softly. Clara smiled, trying to hide her nerves. "I'm just excited," her mother nodded knowingly. "You've come a long way, baby. Don't let fear hold you back now. Remember, this is your gift. Share it." Clara took a deep breath, holding her mother's words close. She knew that today would be a test, not of her talent alone, but of her courage. When she arrived at the town square, the event was already buzzing with energy. Children ran around with ribbons and balloons. Local vendors sold food and trinkets, and townspeople gathered on benches, chatting and laughing. The small stage had been set up near the center, with a simple piano placed carefully under a canopy. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she approached it, her heart pounding louder than the chatter around her. She looked out at the crowd, taking in the expectant faces. Friends from the diner were there, some of her neighbors, even the young cook who had complimented her weeks ago, and in the back, she spotted the music teacher who had encouraged her to perform outside of the diner. "You're ready," the teacher called softly from the side of the stage. Clara nodded, swallowing hard. She took her seat at the piano, adjusting her fingers over the keys. The crowd fell silent as the first note sounded, a soft, trembling sound that slowly grew stronger as she found her rhythm. She began with a tune from her childhood, a hymn her father used to play at the church. Each note carried memories of him, his laughter, his patient hands guiding hers. The music flowed naturally now, confident and full, telling a story that words could never capture. She added in melodies she had composed herself, weaving them seamlessly with the old songs. The crowd listened in silence, completely captivated. Children stopped running, leaning forward to hear better. Adults closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Clara felt a sense of unity in that moment, a connection to every person listening. Her fear was gone, replaced by something stronger, the pure joy of sharing what she loved. By the time she reached the final notes, the entire square was silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then the applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than anything she had ever experienced. People stood clapping and cheering. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Clara felt herself trembling, not from nerves this time, but from emotion. She stood, bowing slightly, a shy smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying over the applause. After the performance, people came forward, shaking her hand, complimenting her, and asking when she would play again. The music teacher approached, beaming. "You were amazing," she said. "I told you you were ready for this." Clara shook her head in disbelief. I didn't know I could do it." "You always could," the teacher replied. "You just needed to see it for yourself." Over the next few weeks, Clara's life began to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. The local community center invited her to perform at more events. Small gatherings, church socials, and even a benefit concert asked for her music. People came to hear her play, drawn by the honesty and emotion in every note. She began to realize that her talent wasn't just something to keep hidden. It was something that could bring joy, comfort, and inspiration to others. Even at the diner, the atmosphere shifted. Regular customers stayed longer, sipping coffee and listening quietly while she played. New patrons came specifically to hear her music. The once ordinary diner had become a gathering place for the community, all because of her courage to play. Her mother noticed the change in her every day. "You're glowing," she said one evening, watching Clara practice after closing. "Not just because of your music, but because you're finally being yourself." Clara smiled. "I feel free," she admitted softly, "like I can finally breathe." Her younger brother, who had watched her grow from a quiet girl into a confident young woman, said one night, "I always knew you were special. Now everyone else knows too." The recognition was nice, but what mattered most to Clara was the feeling inside her, the sense that she had found her place in the world. Music had been the key, but it was courage and perseverance that had allowed her to unlock it. One afternoon, the diner received a letter. It was an invitation to perform at a larger regional event in a nearby town. Clara read it carefully, feeling both excitement and fear. The audience would be bigger, the stage brighter, and the stakes higher. For a moment, she hesitated. The thought of standing in front of strangers again made her stomach flip. Her mother put a hand on her shoulder. "You've faced bigger crowds than this already," she said gently. "Your music is meant to be shared. Don't be afraid." Clara nodded slowly, feeling a quiet strength building inside her. She knew that fear would always be there, but courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it.